The click of the pen echoed in the silent glass-walled conference room, sealing the end of a 15-year marriage. Marcus looked up, a thin, satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He pushed the papers across the mahogany table toward his ex-wife, Serafina. He believed he had won. He'd just discarded the woman he saw as a burden, securing his assets, his future, and his freedom, leaving her with scraps. But as Marcus watched his wife leave, he was oblivious to the man waiting for her downstairs. A man in a car worth more than the entire settlement. A man who knew her true value. The signature wasn't an end. It was the trigger for her real life to begin. The air in the offices of Hartwell, Dean and Associates was refrigerated to an inhuman chill, a perfect match for the atmosphere at the table. It was the 43rd floor, and the view of the city was sharp and unforgiving. Serafina Hayes stared at the watermark on the divorce decree. It was a stylized set of scales, perfectly balanced. The irony was so bitter it almost made her laugh. "If you're quite finished admiring the letterhead, Serafina," Marcus chimed in, his voice oozing a patronizing smoothness. He tapped his own pen, a ridiculously thick gold-nibbed Mont Blanc, against the table. "We don't have all day. Some of us have meetings to get to." His lawyer, a slick man named Harrison, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hayes, your counsel has already advised you. This is the final agreed-upon settlement. It is, I must add, exceptionally generous." Serafina's lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Gwen, shifted in her seat. "Serafina," she whispered, "just sign. It's over. We can't fight him on the business assets clause anymore. It's done." Generous. The word was a slap. Marcus was keeping the 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. He was keeping the stock portfolio, the pension, the 401k, and the art collection. He was keeping the company he'd built, the company she'd named. Serafina was getting a one-time lump sum that wouldn't cover 2 years of rent in a decent neighborhood, plus 1 year of alimony. After that, she was on her own. "It's just business, Sarah," Marcus said, leaning back. His suit was new, a custom Tom Ford, and it pulled tightly across his chest. He'd been working out. He was already building his new life, and its centerpiece was his 22-year-old assistant, Kenzie. "You never understood the business," Serafina said, her voice quiet. It was the first thing she'd said in an hour. Marcus laughed. "What, the charity balls, the dinner parties? Honey, I appreciated the support, I really did. You were a great hostess. But let's be real. You haven't worked a day since we got married. You have no idea what it takes to build something." This was the final insult. The one that cut deeper than the infidelity, deeper than the gaslighting. He hadn't just ignored her contributions. He had erased them. She remembered the late nights hunched over his spreadsheets while he slept. She remembered the proposals she'd helped him write, which meant she wrote them from scratch. She remembered the hobby she'd developed in her spare time, a complex logistics algorithm she'd designed just to prove she could, which he'd laughed at. "Stick to the guest list, Sarah. Leave the real work to me." Her hand was trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so cold and pure it terrified her. She picked up the cheap blue pen provided by the lawyers. She looked at Marcus. His smile was wide now. He thought she was broken. He thought he was watching her crumble. He didn't see the woman who had clawed her way to a full-ride scholarship to MIT. He didn't see the woman who had deferred her own PhD to support his fragile ego. He saw the wife, a domestic appliance he was trading in for a newer model. "Fine," Serafina said. She uncapped the pen. She signed her name, Serafina Hayes, one last time. The signature was firm, a sharp, angry line. She stood up. She didn't look at Marcus again. She left her own lawyer, Gwen, to gather the papers and walked out of the conference room. She didn't look back at the skyline, at the life she was leaving. In the elevator, the sterile silence was deafening. The panic she had held at bay for 6 months finally crested. She was 42 years old. She had a 1-year ticking clock and a resume that had been blank for 15 years. Marcus was right about one thing. He had won. He had taken everything. The ride down the elevator was a descent into a cold new reality. Serafina exited the polished lobby of the law firm and stepped onto the bustling street. The noise of the city hit her like a physical blow. Horns blared. People rushed past, their faces set in the determined masks of those with places to be, careers to build. She was adrift. She was supposed to call a rideshare, go back to the small, sterile two-bedroom apartment she'd rented, and what? Start boxing up the life she'd already lost. She walked a block, then another, until she found a small iron bench outside a public library. She sat, her hands clutching the designer handbag Marcus had bought her last Christmas. It felt like a prop from someone else's life. She had to inventory her assets. The lump sum was a joke. The alimony was an insult. What did she have left? Her mind. For 15 years, Marcus Hayes had been the rising star at Petrocorp, a mid-level energy logistics company. He was Marcus the Visionary, the man who'd streamlined their entire North American fleet. Except he hadn't. Serafina had. It started small. He'd come home complaining about inefficiencies. She, bored and missing the complex mathematical challenges of her former life, had taken a look. Marcus, if you just reroute the New Mexico fleet through the Dallas hub instead of Denver, you cut 18% on fuel costs. He'd presented it as his own idea. He got a bonus. It became their pattern. She was his unpaid, unacknowledged back-office strategist. She built the models. She ran the projections. She wrote the executive summaries. He took the credit. He'd convinced her it was teamwork. We're a unit, Sarah. Your success is my success. But as his star rose, his ego inflated. He stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as staff. Then, as his old lady. The breaking point had been Project Helios. It was her name for it. Her hobby. While Marcus was focused on cutting costs by pennies, Serafina had been looking at the future. Green energy. The problem wasn't generation, it was storage and distribution. The grid was antiquated. She spent 2 years in secret using the open-source data she could find, developing an algorithm. It wasn't just about shipping routes. It was a predictive AI-driven model that optimized energy flow from solar and wind farms to the grid, factoring in weather patterns, consumer demand, and even fluctuating storage cell degradation. It was brilliant. It was revolutionary. And she was proud of it. One night 6 months ago, she'd finally shown him. He was on his third whiskey, texting someone under the table. Marcus. She'd set her laptop open. I have to show you something. I think this could change everything. I call it Helios. He'd glanced at her screen, at the lines of code and the complex data visualizations. He'd scoffed. What is this, Sarah? More of your little spreadsheets, honey. It's cute, but it's not real. It is real. She'd insisted, her voice tight. It could create an entirely new division. It could save the company billions. Save the company. He'd laughed, a harsh barking sound. Kenzie, the name of his assistant. Kenzie just got me the new sales projections. That's what's real. Stick to the charity balls, honey. You're in way over your head. He'd dismissed her. He'd dismissed her life's work as a cute spreadsheet. 2 weeks later, she found the text messages to Kenzie. The sales projections were photos. The business trips were weekends in Napa. But the betrayal of the affair was nothing compared to the betrayal of his dismissal. He hadn't just broken their vows. He had tried to break her. He had erased her, minimized her, and locked her in a box labeled wife so he could feel like the man. Sitting on that bench, Serafina opened her handbag. She pulled out her phone, an older model, not the new flagship Marcus and Kenzie all had. She had one play left. One desperate last-minute 1 in a million shot she had taken 3 weeks ago when she realized Marcus and his high-priced lawyers were going to bury her. She'd done her research. She knew who the real players were in the tech and energy space. Not the peacocks like Marcus, but the sharks. The apex predators. And there was only one name at the top of that list, Damian Knight. Damian Knight was less a man and more a myth in the business world. He was the founder and sole CEO of Knight Vanguard Solutions, a private tech conglomerate that devoured industries and spat out streamlined, optimized, and terrifyingly efficient versions. He was notorious. He was ruthless. He didn't do meetings. He did summonses. He didn't read proposals. He read balance sheets. And he was pathologically private. He had no social media, he gave no interviews, and his photo had only appeared in Forbes once when he'd made his first billion at 30, and once when he'd hostile takeovered the company that had fired him a decade earlier. Finding a way to contact him was virtually impossible. His corporate gateways were firewalled. His executive team was a legendarily tight-lipped circle. But Serafina was a researcher. She hadn't just been a math prodigy. She'd been a data mining expert. She'd spent 48 sleepless hours fueled by coffee and a burning desire for revenge digging through the digital bedrock. She'd found him. Not through a corporate email, but through an obscure alumni portal for an MIT coding symposium from 20 years ago. A username, DKnight, was still attached to an archaic forum. She'd gambled that the associated encrypted email address was still monitored if only by a legacy server. 3 weeks ago, she had composed her cold email. Subject efficiency problem in green logistics. PENP, Mr. Knight. You don't know me. My name is Serafina Hayes. Your competitors believe the primary issue in green energy logistics is generation. They are wrong. The issue is predictive distribution. I have developed a self-learning algorithm that optimizes grid distribution by 18% over current models. This is a conservative estimate. It does not just manage flow, it predicts demand and optimizes storage degradation. Your company, Knight Vanguard, is the only one with the infrastructure to implement it. Everyone else, including my husband's company Petrocorp, is run by fools. I've attached the first 3 pages of the core code. I am in the middle of a contentious divorce. My husband, a VP at Petrocorp, believes this algorithm is a hobby. He is mistaken. I will be legally free, and this intellectual property will be mine and mine alone on October 31st at approximately 11 a.m. If you are interested, you know where to find the fools. I'll be the one walking away from them. S. Hayes. She never got a reply, not a rejection, not a, "This email is unmonitored." Just silence. She'd assumed it was a failure, a desperate, embarrassing Hail Mary. Now sitting on the park bench, her old life signed away, she felt the phone in her hand vibrate. A text message. From an unknown number. Unknown number, 43rd floor. Hartwell Dean. Was the 11:00 a.m. estimate accurate? Serafina's heart stopped. Her fingers fumbled on the screen. Serafina. Yes, it's done. A pause that lasted an eternity. Then the 3-dot typing bubble appeared and vanished and appeared again. Unknown number. My team analyzed your code. Your 18% estimate is wrong. It's 22.4% if you had access to real-time shipping manifests. You didn't factor in waveform optimization. Serafina, I didn't have the data. My access was restricted. Unknown number. I am aware of your husband. The peacock. Unknown number. Stay on the bench. A black Bentley Mulsanne will be there in 2 minutes. Get in. We will discuss your future. Unknown number. And Ms. Hayes. Welcome to the real world. Serafina looked up, her blood roaring in her ears. She was terrified. She was exhilarated. She felt for the first time in 15 years completely and utterly alive. 2 blocks away, Marcus was exiting the elevator, his arm already around his lawyer. "Buy yourself something nice, Harrison," Marcus boomed, slipping him a tip that was more than Serafina's first alimony check. That was a masterclass. "Just doing my job, Mr. Hayes," the lawyer smirked. "Now," Marcus said, pulling out his phone to call Kenzie. "Time to celebrate." He pushed through the lobby doors, whistling, stepping out into the sunlight of his new bright Serafina-free future. Marcus Hayes was on top of the world. He stood on the curb, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit, breathing in the city air. It smelled like victory. It smelled like freedom. His driver was pulling up in the Mercedes S-Class, a fine car, a symbol of his hard-earned success. He was just about to text Kenzie a picture of the signed divorce decree, a little "we did it, baby," when he saw her. Serafina. She was sitting on that pathetic little public bench just down the block. He almost hadn't recognized her. She looked smaller than he remembered, diminished. She was hunched over her phone, probably trying to figure out the Uber app. A wave of pity mixed with smug satisfaction washed over him. This is what she was reduced to. This was the brilliant woman who'd challenged him. A lonely figure on a park bench with a rapidly dwindling bank account. He'd done the right thing. He'd cut the dead weight. He smirked, raising his hand to give her one last pitying little wave. A final goodbye and good luck. He never got the chance. At that exact moment, a car slid into the curb directly in front of Serafina. Marcus paused, his hand still in the air. This wasn't an Uber. It was a Bentley Mulsanne. It wasn't just a car. It was a statement. A rolling bank vault. The paint was a black so deep it seemed to drink the light. The chrome was subtle, but it gleamed with the quiet menace of old money. Marcus knew cars. This was a custom job. A car that cost north of $500,000. It was the kind of car that he saw in magazines and dreamed of. A man in a sharp gray suit, not a driver's uniform, but a suit, emerged from the driver's side. He didn't rush. He moved with an unhurried, crisp efficiency. He walked around the back and opened the rear passenger door. And he held it. For Serafina. Serafina stood up. She looked at the car. She looked at the driver. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and got in. The man closed the door with a sound like a bank vault sealing, a soft, heavy thud. Marcus was frozen on his own curb. His jaw was literally hanging open. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to compute. Who was that? It must be a mistake. Maybe she'd ordered a black car service and got a lucky upgrade. No, those cars didn't just wait on civilians. Maybe it was her lawyer, Gwen. No, Gwen drove a sensible 10-year-old Volvo. The Bentley's engine, which had been utterly silent, gave a low, powerful growl as it prepared to pull away. It had to pass Marcus to get into the flow of traffic. Marcus's own Mercedes was idling behind it, effectively blocked. His driver honked. Marcus waved at him to shut up. He needed to see. He stepped off the curb, moving closer to the street, squinting at the Bentley's heavily tinted windows. He had to know who was in that car. The Bentley slowed as it passed him, almost, he thought, deliberately. And for a fraction of a second the sun hit the rear window at the perfect angle, cutting through the tint. Marcus saw two things. First, he saw Serafina. She wasn't crumpled. She wasn't crying. She was sitting upright, poised, her face pale, but set in a look of intense, focused determination. Second, he saw the man sitting across from her. Marcus's blood turned to ice. His smug smile didn't just fade. It was ripped from his face, replaced by a mask of sick gray horror. He knew that face. Every executive in the country knew that face. He'd seen it on the one Bloomberg cover story the man had ever agreed to. The shark, the titan, the myth. It was Damien Knight. The Bentley glided past its engine, a low whisper of contempt. Marcus was left standing in the street, choking on the exhaust of a car worth more than his entire net worth. The Mercedes horn blared again. "Sir, are you getting in?" Marcus didn't hear him. He was staring at the disappearing car, a single terrible thought echoing in his brain. Stick to the charity balls, honey. What had he done? The inside of the Bentley was like the cabin of a private jet. It was silent, insulated from the city's chaos. The seats were hand-stitched leather, and the air smelled faintly of wood polish and power. Serafina sat opposite Damien Knight. He was not what she expected. He wasn't loud or flashy. He He was dressed in a simple charcoal gray knit sweater and dark slacks. No watch, no jewelry. His power wasn't in his accessories. It was in his stillness. His eyes, a sharp piercing blue, seemed to analyze everything, strip it down to its component parts, and find the flaws. He was holding a tablet. He didn't waste time on introductions. Serafina Hayes, he said. His voice was flat neutral. Your math is compelling. You said my estimate was wrong, Serafina said, finding her voice. It came out steadier than she expected. It was, he said, tapping the screen. You estimated based on public data sets. You were building a model without access to the machine. I gave your core code to my team at Vanguard. They ran it on our quantum servers for 1 hour. He turned the tablet and showed her. It was a 3D model of the U.S. energy grid, but it was alive. Data streamed in real time. This is Project Helios, he said, using her name for it. Your algorithm plugged into our data. You didn't just account for logistics. You created a self-regulating neurosystem. It's not a spreadsheet, Miss Hayes. It's a weapon. Serafina watched, mesmerized. The waveform optimization, I couldn't solve it. You didn't have to. The AI solved it for you. It taught itself. In the first 10 minutes, it found inefficiencies in our own systems. It's already saved me $40 million in projected overstock. He turned the tablet off. The screen went dark. His full attention was on her. So, he said, let's talk about your ex-husband, Marcus Hayes, VP at Petrocorp. What about him? Serafina said, her guard up. He's a fool, Damien said simply. A peacock. All feathers, no brain. He presented a new logistics strategy to his board last quarter. My people acquired the presentation. It was sloppy. It was your work, but it was a bad copy. He'd stolen the engine but had no idea how to drive it. He dismissed it. Serafina whispered, the old wound feeling fresh. Fools dismiss weapons. Damien countered, his eyes narrowing. They're too heavy. I don't. Your divorce was finalized. He glanced at the car's dashboard clock. Approximately 50 minutes ago, correct? Yes. And your settlement. Did he claim any intellectual property? Any business ideas conceived during the marriage? No, Serafina said, a new dawning realization hitting her. He made me sign a clause specifically stating I had no part in his business, that all the assets he'd built were his alone. He wanted to make sure I couldn't touch his company. Damien Knight allowed himself the smallest thin-lipped smile. It was a terrifying sight. He didn't just let you go, Ms. Hayes. He firewalled you. He protected your intellectual property for you. He put it in writing, signed and notarized, that your hobby project belongs 100% to you. He leaned forward. He didn't just sign away his marriage. He signed away a billion-dollar company. The car was moving smoothly through traffic, heading toward the financial district. What happens now? Serafina asked. Now, Damien said, we build. Knight Vanguard doesn't absorb. We incubate. I am creating a new independent subsidiary, Helios Dynamics. It will be your company. You will be the CEO. Me, I haven't worked in 15 years. You haven't been paid in 15 years? Damien corrected her, his tone sharp. There's a difference. You'll have the full backing of my resources, my data, my servers, my legal team. All you have to do is what you've already done, be the smartest person in the room. He paused, looking out the window as they passed a towering glass and steel building. This, by the way, is your new office. We're taking the top 3 floors. He looked back at her. There's just one thing, Ms. Hayes. My backing is not a romance. It is not a gift. It is an investment. I expect a return. You will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. You will not sleep. You will build this empire. And in 1 year, you will make Petrocorp obsolete. You will crush them. Serafina looked at the man. He wasn't saving her. He was arming her. When do I start? She asked. You already have, Damien Knight said. Your first board meeting is at 2:00 p.m. The Bentley Mulsanne didn't so much drive as it processed. It was a black, silent void that moved through the chaotic traffic, parting it like the Red Sea. As it passed Marcus, he saw it all. The moment of eye contact felt like an eternity. He saw Serafina. She wasn't his mousy, discarded wife. She was something else. A stranger. Cold, composed, and powerful. He saw Damian Knight. The man who had bankrupted General Motors' entire EV division as a hobby. The man who had bought the New York Times building not for the paper but for the antenna on the roof. And he saw them. Together. The car passed. The tinted window obscured them once more. But the image was burned into Marcus's retina. His driver, oblivious, finally lost his patience. "Sir, Mr. Hayes, we are blocking traffic." Marcus stumbled back onto the curb, his limbs feeling heavy, his chest tight. The world had just tilted on its axis. "Sarah," he whispered the name, tasting like ash. His mind, which had been so clear and smug moments before, was now a frantic, panicked mess. He started running the calculations. Knight. Knight. Why is she with Knight? And then, like a lightning bolt, the memory hit him. Her hobby. The cute spreadsheets. The thing she called Helios. It could change everything, Marcus. "Stick to the charity balls, honey." His knees went weak. He leaned against a lamppost for support. It wasn't a hobby. It was real. The woman he'd just signed away for a pittance. She hadn't been meeting a new lover. She had been meeting an investor. No, not an investor. A kingmaker. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Oh, God, no." He knew how Damian Knight operated. Knight didn't buy companies. He gutted them. He identified a weakness and inefficiency, and he exploited it with surgical, brutal precision. And Serafina, she hadn't just found a weakness at Petrocorp. She was the weakness. She was the asset he had just quite literally thrown out with the trash. He saw his future flash before his eyes. His promotion. His partnership. His entire career. It had all been built on her work, on the foundations she'd laid. And now, she was taking her blueprints to the one man on earth who could build her vision overnight. He wasn't just going to be beaten. He was going to be erased. The smug smile he'd worn in that conference room felt like a mask of idiocy. He'd been smiling proudly, signing the papers while Serafina sat on a powder keg. And Damian Knight, the billionaire, had been waiting for Marcus himself to light the fuse. The full, agonizing, humiliating reality of the moment crashed down on him. He had been so focused on Kenzie's youth, he'd forgotten Serafina's brilliance. He'd been so obsessed with his own reflection, he'd failed to see the Titan standing behind him. The driver of the Mercedes got out and ran over. "Mr. Hayes, are you all right? Should I call someone?" Marcus looked at his driver, his eyes wide and vacant. He was a man who had just watched his entire world vanish in the polished reflection of a disappearing Bentley. He'd signed the papers. He'd signed smiling. And he'd just watched a billionaire drive his ex-wife away, not as a trophy but as a weapon. And she had looked at him not with sadness but with the cold, hard promise of what was to come. "I'm ruined," Marcus Hayes whispered to the indifferent street. "I am completely and utterly ruined." 6 months later. The world is not changed by grand gestures, Serafina had learned, but by the relentless, quiet application of pressure. The offices of Helios Dynamics, which occupied the 50th, 51st, and 52nd floors of the new Vanguard Tower, were a testament to this principle. The design was minimalist, brutalist, and beautiful. Polished concrete floors, raw steel beams, and entire walls of glass that framed the city like a conquered map. There was no warmth. There was only light, data, and purpose. Serafina's corner office had a view that stretched from the financial district to the ocean. She stood before it, not admiring the view, but analyzing it the same way she analyzed the real-time data streaming onto a holographic display projected in the center of the room. "The grid is stable," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Stability is a low-growth metric, a voice replied. Damian Knight was sitting in one of the two severe black leather chairs opposite her desk. He wasn't looking at the display. He was looking at her as if she were the data stream. Stability is the platform for growth, Serafina countered, not turning. The West Coast grid is optimized. Phase 1 is complete. And Petrocorp, he asked. Petrocorp is a bleeding elephant, she said, finally turning. The transformation was absolute. The soft-edged, quietly desperate housewife was a ghost. This woman, Serafina Hayes, CEO of Helios, was all sharp angles and controlled fire. She wore a tailored charcoal gray dress that looked like it was designed by an architect. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it emphasized the fierce intelligence in her eyes. The elephant is still thrashing, she continued. Their legacy contracts are a liability. Their pension fund is a time bomb. They're hemorrhaging their best engineers. We've poached the top 2 Jennifer Lee from their R&D and Robert Chen from their data science division. They're bleeding, Damian agreed, a thin, satisfied smile playing on his lips. But they are not dead. Their board is stubborn. They're trying to rally shareholders claiming we're engaging in predatory practices. They are painting you as a vengeful ex-wife. Let them, Serafina said, walking to her desk. She tapped a command and the holographic display vanished. They're personalizing their own extinction. It's a classic symptom of failure. They're not your target, Serafina, Damian reminded her, his voice low. The company is. You've isolated them. You've cut off their supply lines. When do you move in for the kill? I'm not here to kill them, Damian, she said, sitting down. She leaned forward, her hands clasping on the black onyx desk. I'm here to acquire them. Their infrastructure is outdated, but it's extensive. Their logistics arm is the last piece of the puzzle. Once we have it, we don't just manage the grid, we own it. They will never sell to you. The name Serafina Hayes is a curse in their boardroom. Which is why, Serafina said, we're not asking. The vote is in 3 days. They're pinning their hopes on a last-minute merger with Apex Energy. It's a pathetic, desperate move. And will it work? Serafina's smile was the one Damian had seen before, the one that meant the math was already done. Apex Energy just pulled their offer. They were persuaded that their investment was unsound. Their CEO, Mr. Wallace, received an anonymous data packet this morning outlining the true state of Petrocorp's pension deficit, the one Marcus forgot to ever properly fund. Damian Knight stood up. He was, for the first time in their 6-month partnership, genuinely impressed. She hadn't just built the weapon he'd asked for. She'd invented new ammunition. You're not a CEO, Ms. Hayes, he said, walking to the door. You're a conqueror. I'm just a woman who understands the math, she replied. And the math says Petrocorp is finished. My motion, which I'll be filing at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, is to initiate a hostile takeover. We will acquire their logistics division for 30 cents on the dollar. The rest of the company, we'll let it be carved up for scrap. Motion provisionally passed, Damian said, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. He opened the door. One more thing. The Future of Energy Summit. You are the keynote. I know. It's tonight, at the Cipriani. I'm aware, Serafina said, already pulling up the SEC filing. It was their flagship event, Damian said, pausing. Petrocorp has sponsored it for a decade. It was his favorite party. Serafina didn't look up from her screen. Her focus was absolute. How ironic, she said, her voice flat. He loved the parties. I loved the work. It seems we've both finally gotten what we wanted. Meanwhile, in a parallel universe of failure, the Camden Court apartment smelled of stale curry, damp carpet, and regret. It was a 400-square-foot studio in a part of town that wasn't up and coming, but long since given up. Marcus Hayes sat on the edge of a lumpy futon, which was also his bed, his couch, and his office. The room was a testament to his implosion. Empty whiskey bottles, cheap brands like Old Crow, cluttered a stained IKEA coffee table. Piles of unopened mail formed small threatening mountains. Most of them were red. Final notice. Account overdue. He was a man haunted. His expensive suits were gone sold for a fraction of their worth to a consignment shop. He now wore a wrinkled graying dress shirt and a pair of stained slacks. His face was puffy, his eyes perpetually bloodshot, his hands afflicted with a slight humiliating tremor. His phone buzzed. He lunged for it, his heart leaping with the pathetic, desperate hope that had become his only real companion. It was Kenzie. He hadn't heard from her in 5 months. Not since the day his assets were frozen in the corporate espionage lawsuit Petrocorp had slapped him with to save face. She'd vanished, taking the Cartier watch and the down payment he'd made on a condo for her. "Kenzie," he croaked. His voice was raw. "New phone, who dis?" The text read. "Kenzie, it's me. It's Marcus. Please, I need to talk to you." The 3-dot typing bubble appeared. He held his breath. "Oh, gross. Don't text me again." The bubble vanished. He was blocked. Marcus roared a sound of pure animalistic frustration and threw the phone against the wall. It shattered the screen's spiderwebbing before going dark. He was completely, utterly cut off. His downfall had been a public execution, fired for cause, sued by his former employer, blacklisted by every headhunter in the industry. The visionary of Petrocorp was now a toxic asset. He'd tried to get work. He'd even tried to get an entry-level auditing job at a small firm. The interview had lasted 5 minutes. The moment the hiring manager, a kid half his age, Googled his name, the interview was over. He was unemployable. He was ruined. And it was all her fault. Serafina. The name was a curse. He spat it. In his mind, he replayed the divorce. He'd been so smart, so dominant. He'd crushed her. He'd won. How had she done this? He knew the name Damien Knight. She hadn't just left him. She'd run to another man. A richer, more powerful man. She'd weaponized her feminine wiles, and used that billionaire to destroy him. It was the only narrative his ego could stomach. She hadn't beaten him with her brain. She'd cheated him with her body. He was the victim. He staggered to his small, grime-caked kitchen, yanking open the fridge. Empty save for a single warm can of beer. He cracked it open, the foam spilling over his shaking hands. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and rot. He had to face her. He had to make her see what she'd done to him. He fumbled with his broken phone, the screen barely responsive. He managed to get to his email. And there it was. A generic, industry-wide invitation. The Future of Energy Summit. Keynote speaker, Serafina Hayes. CEO, Helios Dynamics. Tonight, 7:00 p.m. The Cipriani. His event. His stage. She was keynoting his event. The one he used to host. The one where he'd give the big speech and she'd stand in the back smiling, holding his drink. The rage was so sudden and so hot it almost sobered him up. He stormed to his closet. He had one suit left. His funeral suit, he'd started to call it. A black Hugo Boss from his glory days. It would be tight. He didn't care. He would go. He would get in. And he would confront her. He would remind her of the 15 years they shared. He would remind her of the vows she'd broken. He would look that monster Damien Knight in the eye and he didn't know. He just knew he had to be there. He had to stop this. He had to get his life back. The ballroom at the Cipriani was a sea of power. Chandeliers dripped crystals, champagne flutes chimed, and the murmur of $1,000 a plate crowd filled the air. Serafina was the calm eye of the storm. She wasn't mingling, she was holding court. A U.S. senator on her left, the CEO of Tesla's European division on her right. They weren't chatting. They were listening. She spoke quietly about quantum grid integration, and they hung on every word. Her grasp of the macro policy is astonishing. the senator whispered to an aide. Forget policy, the Tesla exec murmured. She solved the storage degradation problem. She's a decade ahead of us. Across the room, Damian Knight watched from a secluded balcony. He didn't network. He observed. He watched his prize asset rewrite the rules of an entire industry. It was the best investment he'd ever made. Into this world of order, precision, and power stumbled chaos. Marcus Hayes made it past the front door by sheer frantic audacity. He'd told the security guard he was checking the AV equipment for Ms. Hayes. His old stained suit, his wild alcohol-bright eyes, and the reek of whiskey coming off him in waves should have stopped him. But he'd used a name, Richard Chen, a low-level events guy he'd fired 2 years ago, and the guard busy with the crush had waved him in. He stood in the doorway blinking at the opulence. This was his world. This was his party. And she had stolen it. He saw her. She was radiant. It was the only word. She was laughing a real, genuine laugh at something the senator said. She looked younger than she had in a decade. She looked alive. She looked happy. And that was the final insult. He started walking. He didn't run. He moved with the terrifying, single-minded purpose of a man who had nothing left to lose. He pushed past a startled venture capitalist. He knocked over a tray of champagne. He was a creature of mud and filth in a room of polished marble. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice a desperate rasp. The murmur of the room died. 100 conversations stopped. The power of a collective awkward silence fell. Serafina turned, her smile fading not to fear but to a look of annoyance, the kind one might give a waiter who'd spilled a drink. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was cold, colder than the offices, colder than the grave of their marriage. "You're not supposed to be here." "Not supposed to be here," he said, his voice rising, cracking with hysteria. "This is my event. This is my life." He was 5 feet from her now. The senator had instinctively stepped back. 2 large security guards were moving, but Serafina, with a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head, waved them off. This was her problem. She would handle it. "This was your event, Marcus," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You, like Petrocorp, are part of the past." "The past. The past." He laughed, a high-pitched, terrible sound. 15 years, Sarah. That's our past. You can't just erase it. You can't do this. You seduced that ghoul Knight. You used him to destroy me, all because of Kenzie. Is that it? You're this vengeful, this bitch, all over a stupid fling." He was yelling now. His face was a mask of sweat and rage. Serafina waited perfectly still until his tirade ran out of air. The entire room was watching. She took 1 step closer to him. He was taller, but in that moment she towered over him. "Let me be very clear," she said, her voice not rising but cutting through the silence, "so that you and everyone here understand. First," she said, holding up a finger, "you think this is about Kenzie. You think I am a vengeful woman. You have always needed to see me as small. You need to believe this is about emotion, about jealousy. Because if it isn't, you'd have to admit the truth." "What truth?" he spat. "That you're a monster." "The truth," she said, "is that this was never about you. It was about the math. And the math. Marcus, you were just bad at it." She held up a second finger. "You call me vengeful. You say I used Damian Knight. You see this is your fatal flaw. You think everything is personal. You think I did this to you. You are a speed bump, Marcus. A rounding error. You aren't the reason I'm here. You were just the obstacle." I loved you," he whispered, his rage collapsing into a pathetic, desperate plea. It was his last card. "Sarah, please. I'm ruined. I have nothing. Look at me. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. I can help you. I know Petrocorp. I know the old systems. We can run this together like we were supposed to." This was the moment. The final pathetic display of his unshattered ego. He still thought he had something to offer. Serafina looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of emotion crossed her face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pity. It was boredom. "Help me," she said. "You..." "The man who called my algorithm a cute spreadsheet." "I didn't know," he cried. "No," she said. "You didn't look. You didn't listen. You didn't see me. Not as a partner. Not as an equal. Not even as a person. You saw me as an accessory. A hostess. A mirror to reflect your own. What you thought was greatness." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "And the problem, Marcus, is you're not in the reflection anymore. You were never the visionary. You were just the guy who took my work to the office." She straightened up. "You are not ruined because of me," she said, her voice ringing out for the entire room to hear. "You are ruined because you are an arrogant, incompetent fool who valued his own pride over his own assets. You signed smiling, remember? You were proud to discard me." "Security," she said, turning away from him as if he had ceased to exist. "Please show this relic the door. He's obsolete." The two guards grabbed his arms. He didn't fight. He was broken. The words had done what no financial ruin could. They had flayed him to the bone. "Sarah, please," he whimpered as they dragged him stumbling out of the ballroom. Serafina watched him go. She then turned back to the senator, her expression instantly composing itself back into one of pleasant professional focus. "Now, Senator," she said, taking a sip of water, "as I was saying, the problem with the current infrastructure is not capacity, it's latency." From the balcony, Damian Knight smiled. He raised his glass, not to her, but to the brutal, beautiful, and utterly efficient C-suite predator he had helped unleash. 2 hours later, the 200 p.m. sports highlights were long over. The TV in the corner of the Salty Dog pub was now tuned to Bloomberg, the audio barely audible over the jukebox and the clack of pool balls. In the darkest booth, Marcus Hayes sat, his funeral suit now stained with something he hoped was ketchup. He had been deposited on the curb by security. He had walked 6 miles to this bar. His feet were bleeding. His throat was raw. His life was over. He was nursing a glass of the cheapest vodka paid for with the last $3 he'd found in his pocket. And then her face was on the screen. It was a special report. The Phoenix of Energy. A Bloomberg profile. He saw Serafina looking regal and sharp in her office. He saw her at the summit after he'd been removed, giving her keynote to a standing ovation. The anchor, a sharp woman named Anika Sharma, was wrapping up the glowing profile. "Ms. Hayes, this has been a meteoric and, for some, a brutal rise," the anchor said. "Your ex-husband, Marcus Hayes, formerly of Petrocorp, has been vocal. He was forcibly removed from your summit tonight, claiming this was a personal vendetta. Your response..." The camera zoomed in on Serafina's face. Marcus leaned forward, his hands shaking, his breath fogging the glass he held. "Tell them, Sarah. Tell them what you did." Serafina smiled. A polite, warm, media-trained smile that did not in any way reach her eyes. She tilted her head as if genuinely confused. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with polished sincerity. "A personal vendetta. That seems so inefficient." She gave a small, dismissive laugh. "It's a sad story, really." She continued, her tone shifting to that of a patient professor. "When a market leader fails to adapt, it's inevitable. Some people confuse innovation with revenge. They personalize their own obsolescence. I'm afraid I don't know a Marcus Hayes. I only know Petrocorp's failed management. A textbook example of legacy rot. And we've right-sized that." She leaned forward, her eyes bright and cold for the camera. "Now, Anika, if you want to talk about the Helios 3 quantum grid, I'd be happy to." The anchor, stunned by the cold-blooded precision, quickly moved on. In the bar, Marcus's glass slipped from his fingers. It didn't break. It just hit the table, the vodka spilling out, tracing a path through the grime. "I don't know a Marcus Hayes," he whispered. He wasn't just ruined. He wasn't just broken. He was erased. He had signed, smiling, thinking he was the victor. He had proudly watched a billionaire drive his wife away. He had mistaken an execution for a victory lap. He was the fool. He was the relic. He was the ghost at a feast he would never again be invited to, while the woman he had tried to bury had become the phoenix rising from the ashes of his dead, forgotten life. The bartender, seeing the spilled drink, yelled, "Hey, you're cut off! Get out of here!" Marcus didn't move. He just stared at the blank, dark screen of the TV, now reflecting his own empty, obsolete face. That signature wasn't the end of Serafina's story. It was the moment she was finally released. She turned the deepest betrayal of her life into the fuel for her greatest comeback. She didn't need a man to save her. She just needed an investor who recognized her genius. Marcus thought he was discarding a liability, but he was abandoning the very asset that made him powerful. And in the end, he was left with exactly what he deserved: nothing. If you were captivated by Serafina's journey from being underestimated to becoming unstoppable, please show your support. Hit that like button so I know you want more stories of justice and empowerment. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming up next. Thank you for watching.